When my sister, my brother, and I were kids, we'd always wander off to camp, pretending we were stranded with only our animals for company. It was the kind of play that carried you into countless different worlds. In Claridge's hotel's massive chandelier-lit ballroom, nobles, authors, and royal watchers mingled, sipping drinks and exchanging polite smiles. The reason for the gathering? Tom Parker Bowles' latest culinary success, now immortalized in a glossy hardback celebrating refined British cuisine. The air was thick with fragrance, status, and luxury. No one, not even the royal guests sitting quietly near the podium, was prepared for what happened next. Tom, Queen Camilla's son, stepped up to the microphone with polished charm. He thanked his publisher and family before dropping a verbal bomb, his voice laced with an icy undercurrent. "Prince William," he said, "has not been good to my mother. He keeps his distance, as if she doesn't exist in this monarchy." The room froze. Champagne glasses trembled in nervous hands. Reporters scribbled furiously. The Queen's son, often treated as a background figure, had just made himself the headline. But it wasn't Tom's accusation that truly rattled Buckingham Palace. It was Prince William's response, measured, silent, and ruthlessly cold. He didn't storm out, didn't issue a statement, didn't so much as lift a finger in public. Behind palace walls, though, the machinery began to turn. Files were pulled, allies called in, and one name was written in red ink at the top of a confidential list. Tom Parker Bowles. Princess Anne stayed in the shadows, watching. Known for her restraint, loyalty, and sharp instincts, she recognized the move for what it was. Not a son defending his mother, but Camilla moving a pawn on the chessboard. In that moment, an unspoken line between blood and marriage had been crossed. This was no longer about awkward family dinners or declined invitations. This was a direct challenge to the monarchy's very foundation, an outsider, elevated by marriage, now staking a claim where none had been earned. Anne had seen enough. For decades, she had guarded the monarchy's armor. Now, she was ready for war. What followed wasn't chaos, but something far more dangerous. A quiet purge, a secret alliance, and a future king plotting revenge with velvet gloves. What began as a single remark would soon shake Camilla's entire court. And it all started here, in Claridge's hotel on an October evening, as London's fog drifted outside and chandeliers glittered over vintage champagne. But before we continue, we'd love for you to hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying this video. If you just did, we truly appreciate it. Now, let's get back to the main content. It was meant to be a simple evening, a literary celebration for Tom Parker Bowles and his new book on aristocratic dining traditions. Yet beneath the crystal, silk, and polite applause, something far less palatable was about to be served. Tom stood tall on the platform in a tailored navy suit. To most, he was Queen Camilla's charming son, a sharp-tongued food critic with wit and pedigree, but no stake in royal power. Tonight, though, there was something different about him. Focused, intentional. As he scanned the audience, chefs, journalists, aristocrats, and a scattering of royal insiders, his eyes paused on one woman seated calmly in the VIP section, Princess Anne. She wasn't there to sip champagne or flatter the guest of honor. Camilla had invited her as a gesture of unity, but Anne knew better. This wasn't just a book launch. This was a stage, and Camilla had placed her son squarely in the spotlight. Anne recognized the move instantly. Tom was either being tested or, worse, used. Then it happened. Tom leaned into the microphone, his voice measured. "It's been difficult," he began with a small laugh. "My mother, Queen Camilla, has served with grace and strength. But some members of the family, like Prince William, haven't exactly been supportive. He keeps his distance, as if she doesn't exist." The room froze. The easy atmosphere evaporated into a heavy silence. A cough, the clink of a glass, a muffled gasp. Then the press cameras flared, catching Anne's expression. Icy, unreadable, but unmistakably cold. This wasn't a careless slip. It was a deliberate strike. In that moment, Tom was no longer a critic. He was a messenger, accusing the heir to the throne of neglecting the Queen Consort and doing it in front of the public, the press, and the upper ranks of the kingdom without hesitation. Anne's gloved hands gripped the arms of her chair. Her jaw tightened. She said nothing, but her aide leaned in nervously. "Your Highness, what should we do?" Anne's reply was barely above a whisper. "The son of a dangerous mother." It was not an insult, it was a judgment. Within hours, headlines blazed. Camilla's son attacks Prince William at book launch. The story exploded across social media. A royal rift had burst open in a London ballroom. This was no idle gossip. It was a calculated move. A power play dressed up as a personal complaint. By the time the last guest left Claridge's that night, the monarchy's calm had vanished. In Kensington Palace, Prince William learned of the remarks before the morning papers hit the stands. Video clips, transcripts, and a flood of phone calls from advisors arrived on his desk like a storm surge. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He simply sat, reading Tom's words again and again. In public, William stayed silent. In private, something began to shift, not in anger but in precision. Tom had spoken too freely, and in doing so had drawn battle lines against a throne that does not take kindly to challenges, especially from those with borrowed crowns. William, born to the role, would answer quietly and deliberately. To the public, Tom Parker Bowles was just a stylish food writer with a posh accent and a taste for fine dining. But inside the palace, his rise had been deliberate, steady, and far from accidental. It had begun soon after King Charles III's accession, while William and Catherine focused on projecting themselves as the monarchy's future. Camilla, however, was playing another game, one built on closeness to power rather than popularity. During the coronation preparations, Tom was asked to advise on the royal dinner menu, an assignment that seemed harmless but placed him deep inside the palace's inner workings. What looked like a ceremonial courtesy was, in truth, a carefully planned introduction that connected him with estate managers, event organizers, and senior advisors. Camilla had opened the gates just enough for her son to step inside, and Tom did so with purpose. He began appearing at elite gatherings beyond the world of food and wine, quietly building relationships with aristocrats, old-money landowners, and political patrons. At these events, his conversations went far beyond recipes. He spoke passionately about restoring historic estates, promoting sustainable farming, and preserving traditions in modern Britain. His manner was polished, his charm disarming. But beneath it all was ambition. Camilla, ever strategic, gave him a steady push. In private conversations with Charles at Clarence House, she described it as nothing more than a family passion. "He just wants to help," she would say. "A small property in Cornwall, something to manage, something meaningful." Charles, worn down by illness and years of royal drama, agreed without hesitation. It seemed like an innocent gesture toward the son of the woman who had stood beside him through scandal, divorce, and the lingering shadow of Diana. The papers were signed. Tom Parker Bowles became the quiet overseer of a royal estate. The press barely noticed, and the public didn't seem to care. But Princess Anne, and later Prince William, saw the implications immediately. Tom wasn't merely indulging in royal hobbies, he was embedding himself within the monarchy's infrastructure. Each estate gave him greater access. Each meeting expanded his network. All of it was made possible not by tradition or rank, but by Camilla's deliberate maneuvering. His name began to appear on contracts for sustainable agriculture, restoration funding, and architectural projects. He was slipping into the spaces between royal protocol, establishing a foothold in places never earned by bloodline. For Anne, It was déjà vu. She had watched Camilla rise through controversy, charm, and survival. Now she was seeing it again, only this time through her son. For William, it was more than political. It was personal. Tom had not only trespassed into royal territory, he had publicly insulted the future king. Camilla had been playing the long game, but in doing so, she overlooked one unshakable truth of the monarchy. Power can be granted, but only blood can keep it. William had been raised under the weight of heritage. He had been taught to endure rather than react, to rule rather than retaliate. But when Tom's comments reached him, that discipline shifted. It was a calculated strike, delivered in public, laced with Camilla's influence. In his study at Kensington Palace, William sat alone. On his desk, the headline glared back at him from the morning paper. Camilla's son had openly criticized William. The rift inside the royal family widened. William stayed silent. He didn't pace. He simply sat still, his blue eyes cold and unreadable, reading Tom's words again. He keeps his distance, as if she doesn't exist in this monarchy. His quiet wasn't submission, it was strategy. In that moment, the Prince of Wales shifted from a patient heir to something far more dangerous, a king in waiting who was ready to draw boundaries. He summoned one of his most trusted advisors, a man who had served the crown for 3 generations. William's voice was low, but his tone cut like a blade. I want everything on Tom Parker Bowles. Every property deal, every investor, every meeting. And I want to know exactly how deep Camilla is in this. It wasn't rage. It was a declaration of war. Within hours, classified files were pulled, estate contracts, private messages, photographs from exclusive dinners. A clear picture emerged, confirming William's suspicions. Tom wasn't dabbling in heritage projects. He was building influence, using Camilla's crown to create his own fiefdom. Camilla, as always, was the architect. William didn't respond with press statements or interviews. He responded like a Windsor, quietly, methodically, and with precision. He began consulting discreet accountants, loyal legal experts, and senior staff tied to bloodlines, not marriages. Plans were drawn in closed rooms with heavy drapes. Every asset Tom touched would be examined. Every ally in Camilla's growing network would be reassigned. No firings, no spectacle. Just quiet dismantling. He wasn't alone. Princess Anne had already been tracing Tom's activities through her own channels, uncovering patterns, private meetings with duchy managers, suspicious grant requests, invitations to elite estate summits. This wasn't random. Tom was embedding himself in the monarchy's framework, with Camilla clearing his path. Anne knew this was more than etiquette. It was survival. If the Queen Consort was using her son to weaken the monarchy's authority, that authority had the right to defend itself. Days later, in a mist-filled drawing room at Sandringham, Anne and William met. No titles, no formalities, just 2 Windsors preparing for a quiet coup. This ends now, William said, meeting his aunt's eyes. Anne, the monarchy's most unflinching guardian, nodded once. Then let's end it. The prince was unleashed. The palace would never be the same. If Tom had thrown the first stone, William was now moving boulders. What began as a discreet investigation turned into a sweeping royal audit, publicly framed as a routine transparency review for the Duchy of Cornwall. Behind closed doors, everyone knew the truth. It was a direct strike at Camilla. William personally chose the auditors, people with no loyalty to Camilla or her circle. Their instructions were blunt. Scrutinize every contract, every payment, every name linked to Camilla or her son. The team worked in silence, combing through years of records. Within weeks, they uncovered rot. At the center stood Camilla's sister, Annabel Elliot. In public, she was a refined interior designer. In the ledgers, she was something else entirely. She had lived rent-free for nearly a decade on a sprawling Gloucestershire estate owned by the duchy, property meant to generate millions for royal operations. Worse, she had drawn a salary as chief interior designer for 18 years. The title sounded prestigious. The reality? Most projects were outsourced. Some never happened at all. Millions had flowed through phantom contracts. Camilla had built a cushioned refuge for her sister, funded by the monarchy. When the final report reached William's desk, he read it once, then again. His grip tightened until his knuckles whitened. There would be no third reading. That evening, the termination letter was drafted. Annabel Elliott's contract was terminated. Her estate was served with an eviction notice. Vacate within 48 hours. No negotiations, no exceptions. When Annabel received the news, she was in the drawing room of the home she was about to lose. Her hands shook as she called for Camilla among the old rugs and family antiques. "They've kicked me out," she said, her voice cracking. "William didn't even let me explain." Camilla sat in silence. It was the first time her authority had been challenged so openly and with such force. Desperate, she went to her last line of defense, King Charles. She found him in his private study, worn down after another round of medical treatments. His eyes had lost their usual brightness, and his voice was softer than usual. "Charles," she murmured, "I don't understand." "Annabel only wanted to help. This is cruel. Can't you speak to William?" The king looked up slowly, blinking as if he'd been pulled from a daze. "Let William handle it," he said quietly. "I don't want any more trouble." The words struck like a slap. The man who had once moved mountains for her was now unwilling to fight. Camilla realized the truth. She was alone. Her sister was exposed. Her son was vulnerable. Her allies had scattered. And William, he had become the one opponent she could not control. The audit had done more than expose corruption. It had stripped her of protection. For the first time since entering the royal circle, she was on her knees. That winter, Windsor Castle glowed under the light of a gala. Diplomats mingled. A string quartet played. Chandeliers cast golden reflections across polished floors. From the outside, it looked like pure celebration. Those who understood palace politics saw it differently. It was a battlefield dressed in ball gowns. Prince William, the host, moved through the crowd with quiet authority. His black suit was understated, but his presence was not. Every greeting was deliberate. Every glance was calculated. This was his court now. Tonight, all eyes were on how, if at all, he would share it with Camilla. She arrived in an emerald gown that shimmered beneath the chandeliers, her practiced smile masking the fury in her eyes. It had been days since Annabel's expulsion. Days since Charles had told her to let William decide. She hadn't faced William since the audit report, but declining an invitation from the Prince of Wales would have created even more dangerous whispers. So she came, smiling, shaking hands, raising glasses, while humiliation lingered beneath the surface. From the shadows, Princess Anne emerged, her sleek black attire a stark contrast to Camilla's jewel tones. Silver hair brushed back, chin high, her steps were sharp and certain. She didn't smile. She didn't greet. She went straight to the Queen Consort. They stepped into a private alcove behind a heavy gold curtain, just far enough from the crowd for the orchestra's music to cover the tension. Anne's voice was low, cold, and cutting. "Did you really believe you could use the monarchy for your own gain? That you could place your son in a game built on bloodlines?" Camilla stiffened. "I'm not sure what you mean. I've only ever tried to—" Anne cut her off. "You and Tom were building an empire in our name, but you forgot something." Camilla narrowed her eyes. "And what is that?" Anne leaned closer, her tone sharp enough to pierce. "You're not of royal blood. Neither is he. You were invited in. That invitation can be withdrawn." Camilla's mask slipped. Her eyes shone, not with tears, but with fury. "I've given everything to this family. And now," Anne said evenly, "you'll give it back." She turned and vanished into the crowd like a shadow. Camilla stood frozen. Her trembling hand reached for a champagne flute, spilling drops onto the floor. Around her, the music swelled and laughter rose, but she no longer belonged to the moment. By night's end, the message had been delivered without a headline, without a photograph, without a scene. Camilla's reign hadn't ended through exile. It had ended through isolation. Not with scandal, but with deliberate, suffocating silence. And nothing, no crown, no alliances, no past victories, could undo what had just happened. In that single, brutal exchange, she hadn't only lost her influence, she had lost her place.